The world around us is hostile to the Word of God and to biblical values, but we are called to be salt and light, to stand for truth in a decaying culture. We are not called to run from the fire, but be willing to step into the fire. God has placed you at this time in history on purpose and for a purpose. Join us as we get better equipped to address civics and culture from a biblical worldview. Welcome to Into the Fire, powered by Dream City Church. Let's welcome our hosts Alison Furno and Debi Vandenboom.
Today's topic is, are pregnancy centers fake clinics? Joining us, we have the CEO of Choices. This is Marc Burmich. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
So this is a really interesting topic. There has been a lot of chatter on national news about fake clinics. Debi, can you talk a little bit about that and what's going on?
Yeah, so this is one of the favorite talking points that they like to, AOC and some of the other people nationally have been talking about fake pregnancy clinics that offer services to women, trying to imply that they are lying to women, that they're doing something illegal or immoral by lying to women. And just this narrative that they're producing that they're not real clinics, which is decidedly untrue, but it is in an effort to try to pass legislation and do things to make the work of pregnancy centers harder, and also to legalize abortion completely through all 9 months across the country. So, and then even in Arizona, the Attorney General in Arizona recently put out a consumer warning against pregnancy centers, claiming that they needed to warn the public about these dangerous fake clinics in Arizona, which is why we wanted to have Marc on to talk about that, because he's the CEO of a series of centers. There's 3 centers in Arizona that do exactly what they're talking about. One of the places that they claim is a fake clinic. So we wanted his expertise on this today.
Yes, absolutely. So Marc, let's go to you. What is a pregnancy center, first of all, and tell us about what services are offered at Choices?
Sure. So like with most things, the Pregnancy Resource Center, right, it's a broad label, and depending on the actual location and where it's located, whether it's Choices or another facility across the country, there's a wide array of services that can be provided. As it pertains to Choices, we offer free pregnancy tests, free ultrasounds, options counseling, information on abortion. We also offer free boutique items to all of our clients who come in. That can be diapers, that can be formula, all the way up to car seats and cribs. We also offer parenting education programs, and this can be everything from how to be a parent to how to install a car seat, how to set up a crib. And then we recently launched what we call our Pro Dad program, which is a fatherhood mentorship program, because really we want to be holistic in how we're actually helping these families. It's not just about, quote unquote, saving the baby, but it's about making sure that they have an environment to go back to that's healthy. We also offer post-abortive recovery care, which is a very big piece of what we do inside of our organization for individuals that have had an abortion and they want help. We offer that to them in a very confidential, caring environment. That, in a very broad scope for Choices at a high level, is the services that we offer, all completely free to our clients.
STD services too.
So
Yeah.
she kind of stole my thunder a little bit,
Sorry.
but as an add-on, because we really operate specifically at Choices inside this arena of sexual health, as we describe it, we also recently started offering sexually transmitted disease testing out of our Phoenix Center location, and that's at 19th Avenue and Camelback Road, and the response has been overwhelming.
That's awesome. And there's, on that topic, there's a lot of shame that comes with people. The traditional thing is you get married, you have children, and, especially in the faith community, there are a lot of kids or younger people that are embarrassed if they get pregnant, right? And there's a lot of shame, like, I don't want to go somewhere and feel like I'm being judged. Yeah. I don't want to go somewhere and, it's really an uncomfortable thing for a lot of younger people that talk about this. And I think that's why a lot of people opt for abortion so often, because there's so much, they're just like, if nobody finds out about this, or if I just get rid of it, then I won't have to deal with any of those types of consequences. So I love what you're doing with this. Can you kind of talk through, this whole idea that women don't always feel like they're ready to be a mother, right? They don't feel like they're capable. And so a lot of these services you just mentioned are really pivotal to possibly changing their mind or helping them through that. a woman walks into Choices. What is that experience like? Walk me through that.
Sure. So when she walks into the organization, she may or may not have made an appointment, and that's fine at Choices. No matter what, we will make sure that we see this individual. The first thing that happens is we have to verify that she's pregnant, which happens with a pregnancy test. Now, depending on where she is in her pregnancy, she may go immediately in for an ultrasound, or we may have her come back at a later date for the ultrasound. And once we've verified the pregnancy, at that point, it's making sure she's getting the prenatal vitamins, the prenatal care that she needs, making sure that we hook her up with a pro-life OBGYN that's nearby, that we have a network of providers that we work with. And then it also becomes a conversation about where is she at in relation to this pregnancy? Is she excited about it? Was it planned? Was it unplanned? To your point, one of the big factors with these individuals that come in is it's not necessarily so much, and this is kind of a misconception, it's not so much, I don't want to have this child. It's, I don't have the resources or the community around me to support having this child, right? That can be from a spouse, a boyfriend, family, community, you name it. There's individuals that don't feel like they can go to their church and tell people inside of their church, hey, I'm pregnant and I need help. That's also a huge chasm that we have to fill. But once they're in, and depending on what path that they take, we're called Choices for a reason. It is ultimately her choice to make on what happens, but we want to make sure she makes that choice based on all the information made available to her, right? We don't sugarcoat anything. We just tell her, here's the information, but we also have resources and people that can help you, right? So at that point, if it's, yes, I want to keep this child helping me, we can have them go through our parenting education programs. We can have them go to our boutiques and give them all the things that they need to get started. And then we also have a network, what we call our network of care, of providers in the community that can give them ancillary services as they move beyond the four walls of Choices.
That's amazing. And Debbie, have you had the same experience? I mean, what you said is just so crazy that, like you said, it's a lot of times not having the support or the resources, not that they don't want to have the child. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's huge because, it's something that there's a lot of struggle and back and forth from a legislation standpoint where people are thinking, well, there's just a bunch of women who don't want this to happen or they don't, and so that's a huge thing. So let's talk about how normal people, and then we'll get into churches, but how can normal people support pregnancy centers and support these types of efforts?
Do you want to go first?
Yes, Debbie.
So as an individual, I mean, there's a lot of things that you can do to help support a local pregnancy center, everything from donating items for those boutiques, donating diapers, donating clothing, volunteering your time at the centers. There's all kinds of jobs for people to do, prayer teams. There are some more higher level volunteer positions that require training. Talking about them, and even just those everyday conversations with people. This is what I always say here at the church when we talk about this, because I run a pro-life ministry here, is that the if someone is pregnant, they're going to go to a friend of theirs, to their best friend's mom, or to somebody that they trust, that they already know. And so the more we can equip other people, Christians, people in the church, to know how to connect them with those services, the better off they're going to be, because they can say, hey, I can, help you find a place to go get an ultrasound, to get a pregnancy test, someone that can help you walk through this, who knows what you need and to do and where you can find those services.
Right.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. The most fundamental thing I tell people, because we get this question all the time, is no matter where you're located, find the nearest pregnancy resource center, pop in, ask for a tour, get to know the executive director, the team, see if there's any needs. All the things that you just mentioned are absolutely necessary. And then when you have an organization, I hope in your local community that you're supporting, go to your church. Let your church know about it, right? Because at the end of the day, the PRCs, faith-based PRCs, really need the support of the church. It really should be a coming together. It should be a relationship and a partnership between that church and the Pregnancy Resource Center. And at Choices, one of our big initiatives moving forward is going to churches and not asking for anything from the church other than how can we equip you to be able to have that conversation with women inside your church who are pregnant. It's not planned. They need help. And really, our mantra is women should be running to the church, not from the church, if they're facing an unplanned pregnancy.
Right. No, I love that. That's awesome. So that kind of leads into the next question. How can churches support pregnancy centers? And I know that you said it's a relationship, but let's say there's somebody at a church right now in another state, and they're like, I really want to get Choices or a pregnancy center connected here. What would that look like?
Yeah. Again, going back out and finding local pregnancy resource centers in your area is step number one. And there's going to be some due diligence on the part of the church. Not all PRCs are created equal, and as the case with many things. But going in, sitting down with the executive director, that's going to be the individual that runs that organization, and really finding out, what is this place like? What's the DNA? Like what you just asked, what's the journey look like for a client that comes through here?
Right.
And then just asking the simple questions. How can the church help you as a pregnancy resource center? That's fundamental. Every PRC is going to be different. But PRCs that know they have local support from their church and the community, it's like wind in the sails to help them out. Now, it can be financial, it can be volunteer, it can be spreading the words, it can be referrals, it can be all of those things. And then likewise, when clients come into Choices and other PRCs, there's that relationship to say, hey, let me tell you about this church that we know of that has individuals there that can walk alongside you through this journey, hence the supportive community component.
Right. So let's talk about how this relates to our civic duties as citizens and the upcoming election. So how does all of this stuff affect the upcoming election, and what qualities do we need to look for in candidates? Debbie, what do you think?
Yeah, so that's a big question, because that's going to be a hot issue this year in Arizona, but also in a lot of other states. This has been the issue ever since Roe was overturned. This has become the issue in states of trying to make changes, whether for life or for in support of life or in support of abortion, at the state level. So it becomes very important to know who those people are that you're voting for at the state legislature. The attorney general is huge, as we saw in Arizona with Chris Mays putting out that consumer alert, and also the kinds of things that they're willing to prosecute if they're willing to investigate abortion clinics that have complaints against them. We see that in a lot of states where attorney generals are not willing to look at abortion clinics that have complaints where they're harming women and things like that if they are a pro-abortion or have gotten campaign funding from Planned Parenthood or somewhere like that they're not willing to do that work. So that's a really important position, the Attorney General, and then the governor, and just all the way down. We need to know where they stand, how they feel about that, if they're educated, and to build those relationships with them so that they know what's going on inside of a place like Choices, so that they understand the work that's done and how important it is, and they can not hinder it at the state level.
Yeah, you just said something really powerful. You're talking about the attorney general and then also the county attorneys. These are hired by the state, right? Mm-hmm. And you said, are they willing to do what it takes to really enforce the law, right? And so this comes along. I was talking to some people about this the other day, some detectives, and we were talking about how they bring the people who committed the crime to the jail, right? But the attorneys are the ones who make the choice of what actually happens to that person. The officers and the detectives cannot enforce it. It's the attorneys that enforce it. Right. And so understanding that attorney generals and county attorneys are the ones who literally say, yes, you're going to prison for this, or no, you're going to be released out back into the public. That's a huge responsibility. And so are they willing to do that is a key thing for sure.
Yeah, and we saw that, just as a little side note, but this is connected, in that we saw that in California and with Kamala Harris before she was in the Senate. She was the Attorney General of California. And there was some expose work done by journalists of things that were illegal going on inside abortion clinics in California. And they not only refused to prosecute, they met with the abortion clinics and kind of conspired what they were going to do, and then went after the journalist who was exposing it and confiscated his stuff. So you have, and this is not a one-time, it's not an isolated thing. It's happened in New Mexico. It's happened in some other states where you see that they are not only not enforcing the law, but they're actually conspiring with the clinics to cover up whatever's going on and go after the people that are trying to expose anything that's happening that's hurting women.
That is so crazy.
Yeah, it's crazy. So it's a really important elected office, that Attorney General.
It's huge.
On the life issue especially.
It is. I mean, the moral of the story here is local politics is really, really important. I can't hammer that enough. I know, the national scene is very appealing. It's the presidential race. It's, there's a lot of money that goes into that, a lot of momentum. Listen, at the end of the day, if you're not paying attention to your local politicians and what's happening there, you're in for a world of hurt and a huge surprise. And to your point, you just have to understand where everybody is at, and as appropriately as possible, educate them on the realities of what's happening.
Yeah. And this is something, you sound like you've been on our show, because we talk about that all the time, about local level politics.
Yes.
That's our heartbeat here. We want to encourage local level political activity.
That's where it's at.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's where you have the ability to make the most change, right? Yep. A lot of people get very discouraged about a presidential election. And it's like, okay, well, I understand that's a big thing. But at the same time, we have everything from statewide to school board to becoming a PC, so many things that you can get involved with, and you can see change directly happen when you engage with the people that are elected in your area, right?
Right. Well, and even school board, because it has to do with what they're talking about with sex education and the kinds of things that they're pushing. Are they trying to push girls to Planned Parenthood, or are they telling them the truth about what's going on in human anatomy? And they're not even teaching them about pregnancy, gestation, and what happens in the womb. A lot of the sex education classes are not even talking about that as a result of
Yeah, it's very interesting too. I've heard a couple of teachers talk about this just at different places that I'm at, where they're saying, hey, in sex ed, I'm giving kids condoms and I'm doing these things, and I'm like, whoa, I'm like, are you educating kids about anything else? Or, so it's interesting because there really is a lot of people who are pushing this sexualization of kids and making sure that they have access and ideas about abortion before they've even had sex, realistically. So
yeah, and take a quick rabbit trail on this. We talked about STD testing a moment ago.
Yeah.
So at the end of every client interaction, we ask them for feedback. We'll ask them some questions. And one of the biggest responses we get on the STD side is the education component. So that's one of the differentiators at Choices with our STD program. And what's important is that we don't only treat, we educate.
Yeah.
A bulk of the time is spent on education. I bring it up because most people are grossly uneducated in this state, and I think across the country in terms of their sexual health, and we see it every single day. Just last month we had a 40-year-old man in the waiting room. Later that day we had a 30-year-old female professional executive coming in for an STD test, and then we had 15-year-old girls in there. I mean, it's a wide spectrum of individuals that are coming in, all grossly uneducated in terms of their sexual health. So it's prevalent.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's definitely a underserved area for sure. So let's go to this last point here of, Debbie, can you explain the ballot initiative and what's happening in Arizona with that?
Yeah, so there's a lot happening, but they're trying to get an amendment. We've talked about it on the show before, but
yes,
collecting signatures right now, and we don't know if they have all of their signatures yet. I think they're close to try to get it on the ballot in November. That would enshrine abortion into Arizona's constitution, and they're trying to say that it just offers choice, but it really opens the door and allows abortion through all 9 months. It allows minors to get an abortion without parental knowledge or consent. There's questions about what kinds of whether professionals, doctors, nurses would have the right to not participate in an abortion if they had a moral objection to it. Opens the door to funding where you and I would be paying for someone else to have an abortion. Just so many things that are in there. It's a very extreme. They're painting it as something that's not extreme, but it's very extreme, and it would make us one of the most extreme abortion states in the country if it were to pass in November.
Can you explain really quick, because I want, even though I hate the visuals are helpful. You said abortion through all 9 months. So explain what, if somebody is 9 months pregnant.
Yeah. So, and the people will like to say that does not happen or that it's only for medical, but there's evidence to the contrary on that. There was just a case in New Mexico a few years ago where there was a wrongful death suit of a late-term abortion procedure that the doctor was supposed to find out information to say whether or not it was medically necessary in order for the state to pay for it. Mm-hmm. Well, the doctor didn't even ask if it was medically necessary, just signed off on it and said, oh yeah, it's necessary. But she never even asked the girl whether what the reason was why she wanted to have an abortion, and she ended up dying of sepsis. So we know for a fact that it happens. We know that they don't always tell the truth about the reasons why. But there are procedures that happen at all different levels. From viability is a moving target. They say it's 24 weeks, but babies have survived at 21 weeks. And the more advanced science gets, the farther that could potentially be pushed back. So it's very murky as far as where viability. The issue of viability, because you can have a full-term baby that doesn't survive, and you can have a tiny little preemie that beats all the odds and does survive. As far as diagnoses, all of those things, right? There's no way to tell for sure whether a baby is going to survive or how healthy they're going to be. But it opens the door for that for past 24 weeks because it says that if the abortionist who is getting paid to do the abortion thinks that it's necessary, that it's allowed. So they're making money off of it. They're not going to say that it's not necessary.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think that's a big key here is that sometimes people looking from the outside just think I want the ability to choose. That's their initial thought, right? Is that anybody who says otherwise is trying to control me or control my body or all that stuff that we hear. So, Mark, what's your perspective on this? I mean, how do we educate people and stop this from actually passing?
In terms of it not passing, we go back to local politics, right? And like we say at Choices, we're here to impact our communities, and that happens one client, one story at a time. Every client's journey is unique. It's unique to them, and it's unique to us. And with regards to how pregnancy resource centers like Choices can be involved in this, it's really just educating those that we work with. That could be people that support us. Educating our churches is a big part of that. Churches can really be a conduit. And again, to stress, it's not a political issue, right? It's to your point earlier about a civic issue. People need to be educated on what's actually happening, and the church is a really good conduit to educate people on what is happening, and then people from that point can actually take the action to then spread that information to the masses. What this really comes down to is a lack of education, and it's also indicative of the sort of moral, cultural shift that we have seen in our society, plain and simple. And so, at Choices, obviously, our primary focus is that client that walks in the door, and that's always going to be our primary focus. But on the ancillary, for us, it's just getting the word out every way that we can appropriately through our partners, through our networks, through our churches, and then having those people, we hope, take the initiative to take it to a broader audience and just educate. It's okay to have a conversation with somebody about abortion. Okay, we shouldn't be afraid to have that conversation. I think there's a lot of trepidation in today's society because it's so polarized and so volatile.
Right.
If you take a very measured approach to it and just speak fact and truth and do so from the position of, hey, I just want to make sure that you understand, do it that way. At that point, it's up to them on what action they want to take. The other side that is actually pushing this initiative, I mean, let's not kid ourselves. There's a lot of momentum. They are very energized, and it's going to be a really interesting November, no doubt about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's one of the biggest things that you just said that's very important is that we stay objective. We're not emotional about it, right? We're not angry. We're not whatever. We're objective in this conversation. And I think there's also a lot of times a lack of empathy that some of these people, like you said, are just they don't know. And nobody has told them, and they've been told otherwise. There's petition gatherers all across Arizona right now trying to get signatures. And if you go up and have a normal conversation with them, most of them will talk to you and they'll say, this is the experience that I had for why I want this to pass.
Yeah, I had a conversation with one of them a couple weeks ago.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was a gentleman, and he was grossly misinformed, but a nice guy.
Yeah. And that's exactly what we have to remember is that if we can educate people we're supposed to do it with love and truth, right? That we can do that without, because there's so much anger around this topic on both sides, right? Yeah. And so it's our job, I think, as just the community to say, okay, look, here's what's actually happening. Here's what it would be if it did pass. And this does go too far. It's too extreme for Arizona.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, that's all the time we have. Thank you, Mark, for joining us today.
Thank you.
And thank you so much for joining us on Into the Fire, powered by Dream City Church.
You can listen to this podcast on Apple and Spotify and follow us on social media. Find all the info on the show notes. To learn more about Dream City Church, visit our website at dreamcitychurch.us. Thanks for listening.